As soon as Trump got into office, he immediately hits the ground running, signing executive order after executive order. It was very clear that he had and still has an agenda. And unfortunately, one of those agendas seemed to be doing everything within his power to get rid of fair housing in this country. For whatever reason, fair housing in America is under attack. So what exactly is fair housing? Well, before 1968, housing discrimination against blacks and other minority groups was widespread and deeply entrenched in American society. Racial and religious minorities face significant barriers to home ownership and rental opportunities. Redlining, steering, blockbusting, restrictive covenants. These were all discriminatory practices that were very common, and federal policies actually contributed to this discrimination. The Federal Housing Administration's 1938 manual explicitly stated that the infiltration of inharmonious racial groups could negatively impact credit risk, which led to discriminatory lending practices. In response to the growing pressure from the civil rights movement and the need for fair housing practices, Congress passed the Fair Housing Act of 1968, which prohibits discrimination in housing based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, familial status, and disability. And this is a federal law, so all states must abide by it. And states also have the power to add additional classes that are protected as it pertains to housing discrimination. Like the state that I live in, Maryland, it's also illegal to discriminate against anyone based on marital status, sexual orientation, gender identity, and source of income. And these laws not only applies to landlords, but it also applies to mortgage lenders, credit unions, home sales, savings institutions, and appraisers. The bottom line is that fair housing is needed to ensure that everyone has an equal opportunity to find and afford safe and decent housing. Now, pretty early on, Trump let it be known what direction he was headed in. A week within his second term, he fired HUD's Inspector General, which acts as the agency's watchdog. In government terms, a watchdog is an individual or a group of individuals that monitor the activities of another entity. Someone to sort of hold the agency accountable and to make sure that they're not doing anything illegal or unethical. He also ended the affirmatively furthering fair housing rule, which was also suggested that they do in Project 2025. This rule required agencies to take meaningful action to combat and dismantle discrimination. So now the requirement for agencies to comply with fair housing laws are a lot softer, and it's almost a guarantee that the number of fair housing complaints will rise. Each year, there are over 30,000 complaints that must be investigated, and the majority of those investigations are outsourced to private and nonprofit organizations, who handle about 75% of those complaints. Now, since Trump returned to office, more than 60% of these organizations were notified that at the direction of the president and DOGE, these fair housing grants were being canceled. This means that the country's enforcement for discrimination complaints will be crippled, and in some places, completely dismantled. Imagine having laws against criminal activity, but no police officers to actually enforce those laws. Without enforcement, the law means nothing. It's not enough to just say, hey, don't discriminate, that's bad. If there are a lack of consequences, it will take us back to the 50s and early 60s, and even before, when discrimination in housing was more acceptable and legal. Well, this prompted 4 member organizations of the National Fair Housing Alliance to file a class action lawsuit, stating that the grants were canceled arbitrarily and without notice, reason, or sensible explanation, and that it has caused an immediate and devastating impact, causing them to shutter programs, terminate services, lay off staff members, and shrink their core activities. They're being represented by a civil rights law firm, and they argued that the grants had already been authorized by Congress, and neither the president nor DOGE has the authority to cancel them. And this was the main reason that the district judge chose to reinstate the fair housing grants that were canceled, and to issue a temporary injunction. As of now, the lawsuit is still ongoing. Now, another one of Trump's agendas that'll affect fair housing is to dismantle the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, also known as the CFPB. The CFPB is an independent agency of the United States government that's within the Federal Reserve. Their role is to implement and enforce rules for financial institutions and ensure that their products are transparent and fair. Their main priorities are mortgages and credit cards. And since their creation in 2010, they've curtailed abusive debt collection practices, reformed mortgage lending, extracted nearly $19 billion in refunds, and canceled debts of 30 million consumers. Nearly 2 weeks after Trump took office, he fired the CFPB director and began the process of dismantling the agency, shutting down most of its functions, cutting off its funding, and firing staff. Immediately, the National Treasury Employees Union, who represents over 1,000 employees at CFPB, filed a lawsuit claiming again that only Congress, not the president, has the power to create or destroy executive branch agencies and dictate their missions. This led to a federal district judge temporarily stopping the mass firings at the agency, and also blocked the Trump administration from taking steps to defund the agency. Eventually, the lawsuit made its way to the federal appeals panel, and they seem inclined to find a middle ground. In the end, they sent the case back to the district court to the original judge. As of now, the case is still ongoing, but if the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau were to be dismantled, it can weaken consumer protections and potentially return to pre-2008 levels of corporate fraud. Due to the massive cuts to fair housing enforcement by Trump and his administration, Senator Elizabeth Warren, who was also a ranking member of the Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee, penned a letter with other senators to the Government Accountability Office, which is the federal government's watchdog agency. The letter called for an investigation into the Trump administration's drastic cuts to fair housing enforcement at HUD, mentioning that Trump is taking steps to reduce HUD's ability to enforce the Fair Housing Act, and also that his administration reportedly has plans to terminate nearly 80% of the staff at the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. In response to Senator Warren's letter, the Government Accountability Office confirmed that they will investigate the drastic and dangerous cuts to the fair housing enforcement at HUD, saying that this issue was well within the scope of their authority. And in response to GAO accepting her request, Senator Warren responded with a little dig at Trump, saying, "I am pleased to announce that GAO is taking our request to investigate co-president Donald Trump and Elon Musk's dangerous cuts to fair housing enforcement at HUD." She called him co-president with Elon Musk. But it does seem that Elon has a lot of authority and is calling a lot of shots within the government. I'm not sure what he has on Trump or what Trump owes him, but Elon seems to have a lot of power. Now, the irony in all of this is just recently, HUD Secretary Scott Turner decided to designate April as Fair Housing Month. In the middle of all of this turmoil with fair housing right now, grant cuts, staff firings, multiple lawsuits, investigations, he decides that now is the time to raise awareness about fair housing laws and to promote equal access to housing for all, at a time when they're actually weakening fair housing in this country. Now, granted, the passing of the Fair Housing Act was on April 11th in 1968, but it's definitely ironic that they choose to do it now while all of this fair housing drama is going on. Now, with everything that's happened and is continuing to happen, as surprising as it may be because of how fast, drastic, and extreme the actions of this administration have been, Trump has shown a history of issuing policies or taking actions that weaken the enforcement of fair housing laws. One example of this is during his first term. His administration finalized the rule on disparate impact, which is a tool used to fight against discrimination. In a disparate impact case, someone can challenge unjustified policies or practices that harm people and treat them unfairly. Under Trump, the rule was changed and added overwhelming obstacles for a victim to prove discrimination. So Trump and his administration weakening fair housing laws is nothing new. Fair housing laws are needed in this country to protect people and groups of people from discrimination. There needs to be someone to hold companies accountable for discriminatory practices, or else they'll be able to freely discriminate without any consequences. Whether you're a Republican or Democrat, I think we all would agree that everyone wants to be treated fairly when it comes to housing. Hopefully, these lawsuits will prevail and the enforcement of federal fair housing laws won't be weakened. As of now, we can only watch and see what's going to happen. As always, thanks for watching.